In the farthest reaches of existence, beyond the fragile understanding of lesser civilizations, beyond even the oldest recorded stars, there stretched an empire so vast that maps could not contain it. It was an empire of silence and dominance, of order forged through absolute power. Entire galaxies revolved under its authority like obedient constellations, their light dimmed by the shadow of a single throne. At the center of it all stood the emperor. He was not merely a ruler. He was a force, ancient, unyielding, and absolute. His form towered above his subjects, a being shaped by a civilization that had long ago surpassed mortality. His skin shimmered like obsidian infused with starlight, and his eyes burned with a pale, cosmic glow that seemed to pierce through space itself. When he spoke, fleets listened. When he moved, worlds trembled. And when he judged, there was no appeal. The Empire of Strength. In this empire, strength was not admired, it was worshipped. From the moment a being was born, its worth was measured, weighed, and recorded. Weakness was not tolerated, it was not nurtured, it was erased. Civilizations that failed to prove their power were assimilated or extinguished. Generals who hesitated were replaced. Even the emperor's own bloodline was not exempt from this relentless philosophy. Power defined existence. And nothing symbolized that power more than the dragons. The dragons of the empire were not mere creatures. They were living weapons, beings of immense energy capable of warping space, incinerating fleets, and bending the laws of physics to their will. Each emperor throughout history had bonded with one, forming a link that amplified their dominion across the cosmos. A dragon was not just a companion. It was proof. Proof that the emperor was worthy of ruling everything that existed. And so when the emperor's own dragon laid an egg, the empire watched. The waiting. For cycles uncounted, the egg had rested within the palace. It was kept in the obsidian hall, a vast chamber carved from a material older than any known star. The walls seemed to absorb light, leaving only faint reflections of those who entered. Energy pulsed softly through the floor, maintaining the precise conditions required for incubation. Guards stood at every entrance, motionless as statues. Scholars monitored fluctuations in energy signatures. Priests whispered ancient rites. And nobles gathered, each one anticipating what would emerge. The egg itself was enormous, larger than any war machine built by the empire. Its surface shimmered with shifting patterns as if galaxies were forming and collapsing beneath its shell. Energy radiated from it in waves, distorting the air and bending light into strange, fleeting shapes. It was, by all measures, extraordinary. The readings are unprecedented, one scholar had whispered days before the hatching. If the projections are correct, this dragon may surpass all others. That single statement had spread across the empire like wildfire. A superior dragon. A creature greater than any before. The emperor's reign, already unmatched, would become absolute. Expectations rose. Anticipation deepened. And then, the egg began to crack. The hatching. The obsidian hall filled quickly. Generals clad in armor forged from collapsed stars took their places along the edges of the chamber. Nobles adorned in radiant fabric stood in clusters, their eyes fixed on the egg. Scholars adjusted their instruments, recording every fluctuation in energy. Above them all, upon an elevated platform, stood the emperor. He did not sit. He never sat during moments of importance. His presence alone commanded the room, a towering figure of silent authority. The faint glow of his eyes illuminated the darkness around him, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor. Everything stilled. Then came the sound. A crack, sharp, sudden echoing. Every head turned. A thin fracture appeared across the egg's surface, glowing faintly from within. Energy pulsed through it, causing the crack to widen, branching outward like lightning frozen in time. Another crack followed. And another. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. "Prepare yourselves," one of the generals muttered quietly, his voice tight with anticipation. "We are about to witness greatness." The egg trembled. With a final, resounding fracture, the shell split open. Light burst forth, brilliant, blinding, overwhelming. For a moment, it seemed as if a new star had been born within the hall. Then the light faded. And what remained was not what anyone expected. The hatchling. Silence fell. Not the respectful silence of awe, but the heavy, suffocating silence of confusion. At the center of the shattered shell lay a small figure. It was underwhelming. The hatchling struggled to lift itself, its limbs thin and unsteady. Its scales, instead of gleaming with radiant energy, appeared dull and uneven, patchy, almost brittle. Its wings were small, folded awkwardly against its body, lacking the vast, powerful span that had been anticipated. It did not radiate overwhelming energy. It did not warp the space around it. It simply existed. A faint sound escaped it, a weak, uncertain cry that barely carried across the chamber. The scholars stared at their instruments, confusion spreading across their faces. The readings, one of them whispered, they're minimal. That's impossible, another replied. The energy signature before hatching was. I know what it was, the first interrupted, his voice shaking. This doesn't match. The nobles exchanged glances, their excitement fatting into unease. The generals stood rigid, their expressions hardening. And at the center of it all, the hatchling tried to stand. Its legs trembled beneath it. It took one step, then another, and then it slipped. Its claws scraped uselessly against the polished floor as it collapsed, its body too weak to support itself. A faint murmur rippled through the chamber. It began softly, barely audible. Then it grew. Laughter, quiet at first, then sharper, mocking. This is the Emperor's dragon, one noble whispered, unable to hide the disbelief in his voice. It can barely stand, another added. A defective hatchling, a general muttered, his tone laced with disappointment. The sound spread, echoing through the hall like a slow, rising tide. And then, it stopped. Because the Emperor moved. The Emperor's judgment. He stepped forward, descending from his platform. Each step echoed. Heavy, deliberate. The room fell silent instantly. No one dared speak. No one dared move. The Emperor approached the hatchling, his towering form casting a shadow over it, his glowing eyes fixed upon the small creature, analyzing, measuring, judging. The hatchling looked up at him. Its eyes were wide, hopeful. It made a soft sound, as if recognizing him, as if seeking approval. The Emperor said nothing for a long moment. Then slowly his eyes narrowed. This, he said, his voice low and cold, is my heir's dragon. No one answered. No one could. The hatchling shifted slightly, attempting to rise again. Its wings fluttered weakly, failing to lift its body even an inch. The Emperor watched. Every movement, every failure, and in his gaze there was no warmth. Only calculations, only judgment. Finally he spoke again. Useless. The word struck like a shockwave. It echoed through the hall, reverberating against the walls, sinking into every corner of the chamber. The hatchling froze. It cannot fly, the Emperor continued, his voice rising, each word sharper than the last. It cannot roar, it cannot inspire fear. He turned away, already dismissing it. It is unworthy. The final judgment. Absolute. Irrevocable. The fall. Remove it, the Emperor commanded. The guards hesitated. Just for a moment. They looked at the hatchling, small, trembling, struggling to even remain upright. It did not look like a weapon. It did not look like a threat. It looked helpless. Take it away, the Emperor repeated, his voice colder now, edged with impatience. Let it not disgrace my empire. The hesitation vanished. Orders were absolute. Two guards stepped forward, their armor clanking softly with each movement. They approached the hatchling cautiously, as if expecting it to react. It didn't. It simply looked at them. Then past them. Back at the Emperor's. Its eyes held something fragile. Something that did not belong in that hall. Hope. But the Emperor did not look back. He had already turned away. The guards lifted the hatchling. It did not resist. Its small body trembled in their grasp, its wings hanging limply at its sides. As they carried it away, its gaze remained fixed on the Emperor. Waiting, hopping, but no acknowledgement came. No second glance. No reconsideration. Nothing. Forgotten. The doors of the obsidian hall closed behind them. The echo lingered. Inside, the court slowly returned to life. The nobles resumed their whispers. The scholars debated what had gone wrong. The generals discussed future strategies, already planning replacements. And the emperors. He did not speak of the hatchling again. To him, it was already gone. Erased. Forgotten. Because in his empire, worth was decided in a single moment. And weakness had no place. Beyond the palace, far from the glowing towers and endless fleets, beyond the reach of the emperor's immediate gaze, the hatchling was taken to the outer sectors. There were no grand halls there. No reverence. No attention. Only cold metal platforms and distant stars. The guards placed it down without ceremony. One of them paused, looking at the small creature. "It won't survive long," he said quietly. The other did not respond. They turned and left. The hatchling was alone. The vastness of space stretched endlessly around it, silent and indifferent. It tried to stand again. Its legs shook. It took a step, then another, and once more. It fell. A faint, broken sound escaped it. But no one heard. No one came. In the distance, the empire continued, vast, powerful, unstoppable. And the creature the emperor had called useless was left behind, unseen, unwanted, forgotten, far from the emperor's palace, far from the towering spires of power, the echoing halls of judgment, and the suffocating weight of perfection. There existed a quieter corner of the empire. It was a place that the emperor rarely considered. A place where ambition dulled and survival took its place. A place where forgotten things drifted. The outer trade stations. The edge of the empire. The station floated at the very edge of a minor system, anchored between broken asteroid belts and fatting stars. It was not grand, it was not important, it was simply useful. Ships arrived. Ships departed. Cargo changed hands. Stories passed through. The station itself was a patchwork of technologies from countless civilizations. Sections had been added, removed, repaired, and abandoned over generations. Metal corridors twisted into each other like veins, humming faintly with energy. Dim lights flickered, never fully reliable, casting long shadows that shifted with every passing hour. It was not beautiful, but it was alive. Here, no one cared about perfection. Only function. Only survival. And among the merchants, smugglers, wanderers, and exiles, there lived a human. The man who listened. Humans were rare in this part of the empire. Fragile, short-lived, and lacking the raw physical power of many alien species, they were often overlooked. Some pitied them, others dismissed them entirely. But this human had carved out a place for himself, not through strength, but through something far more subtle. Understanding. His shop was small, tucked into a quiet corner of the station where foot traffic slowed and noise softened. A simple sign hovered above the entrance, glowing faintly in several languages. It did not boast. It did not demand attention. It simply existed. Inside, the space was warm, unexpectedly so. Soft light replaced the harsh flicker of the station's corridors. Tools were arranged neatly, each one carefully maintained. The air carried a faint, clean scent, calming to most species. And at the center of it all stood the barber. He was not imposing, not remarkable at first glance. His build was average, his features unassuming. His hair was slightly unkempt, as if he spent more time caring for others than himself. But his eyes were different. They were attentive, observant, patient. He watched people the way others studied stars, quietly, carefully, noticing what most would overlook. He did not talk much. He listened, and in a place like this, that was rare. A different kind of skill. The barber's craft was unusual in an empire built on power. He did not wield weapons. He did not command fleets. He did not study the physics of collapsing stars. He worked with small things. Details. He trimmed, shaped, polished, and refined. But what made him valuable was not just his skill, it was his adaptability. Over time, he had learned the needs of countless species. Some had fur that needed delicate layering to regulate temperature. Some had crystalline structures that required precise polishing to maintain resonance. Others had tendrils, feathers, or scales that demanded entirely different techniques. He studied them all. Not in laboratories, not through cold analysis, but through observation, through experience, through listening. And slowly, quietly, he became something rare in the outer sectors. Trusted. Travelers came to him not just for grooming, but for conversation, for silence, for a moment of calm in a chaotic universe. He offered no judgments, no expectations, only care. And that made all the difference. The quiet evenings. The day had been long. Ships had come and gone, bringing with them the usual mix of tension and exhaustion. A trader had argued over prices. A pilot had complained about failing navigation systems. A soldier had sat in silence, staring at his reflection as the barber worked, saying nothing at all. By the time the station's artificial night cycle began, the corridors had quieted. The barber closed his shop. He cleaned his tools one by one, placing each back in its proper place. The familiar routine grounded him, steady and predictable in a world that rarely was. He paused for a moment, stretching his shoulders. Silence settled around him. And then, a sound, faint, almost imperceptible. A whimper. He frowned slightly, tilting his head. It came again. Soft, a weak, coming from outside. He moved toward the door, curiosity replacing fatigue. The panel slid open with a quiet hiss. Cold air drifted in. And there, just beyond the threshold, was the hatchling, the forgotten creature. It was curled against the metal floor, its small body trembling. Up close, it looked even worse than it had from afar. Its scales were dull, uneven, and cracked in places, like something that had grown incorrectly. Layers of hardened material clung to its body, giving it a rough, brittle appearance. Its wings were folded tightly, almost unnaturally so, as if they had never been properly extended. And its breathing, shallow, unsteady. The barber crouched slowly, careful not to startle it. "Well now," he said softly, his voice calm and gentle. "You look like you've had a hard day." The hatchling didn't move. It didn't growl, didn't show teeth, didn't even try to defend itself. It simply opened its eyes, tired, dim, and filled with something that the barber recognized immediately. Exhaustion, not just of the body, but of the spirit. It blinked at him as if trying to understand what he was. And then it let out another weak sound. Not a threat, not a warning, a plea. The barber's expression softened. "All right," he murmured, "let's get you inside." An unlikely guest. He moved carefully, sliding his hands beneath the hatchling's body. It was lighter than he expected. Too light. Its body tensed for a moment, as if anticipating pain. But none came. He lifted it gently. The creature did not resist, did not struggle. It simply relaxed, trusting, or perhaps too tired not to. He carried it into the shop, the door closing behind them with a soft hum. Inside, the warmth returned. The hatchling stirred slightly, its body responding to the change. The barber placed it down on a padded surface, adjusting its position so it could rest comfortably. "There we go," he said quietly. He stepped back, observing, not judging, just seeing. And what he saw made him frown. Something was wrong. At first glance, it looked like weakness. But the barber had learned long ago that appearances could be misleading. He leaned closer, studying the creature carefully. The scales, the texture, the way they overlapped. Something wasn't right. He reached out slowly, touching one of the outer layers. It was hard. Too hard. Like a shell that didn't belong. He pressed gently. The hatchling flinched but didn't pull away. The barber murmured. He examined further, tracing the layers with careful fingers. They weren't natural. Or rather, they weren't meant to stay. These were shedding layers. Old growth. Dead material. But instead of falling away, they had hardened, trapping the creature inside its own development. Restricting movement. Limiting growth. Weighing it down. The barber leaned back slightly, realization settling in. "Not weak," he said quietly. The hatchling shifted, its eyes half opening. Just stuck. The work begins. He moved slowly, gathering his tools. Not weapons, not instruments of power, but tools of care. Small, precise, carefully designed for delicate work. He returned to the hatchling, kneeling beside it. "This might feel strange," he said softly, "but I'll be careful." The creature watched him, its breathing still uneven. But it didn't move away. Didn't resist. So he began. Patience. The first layer was the hardest. He worked gently, loosening the edges of the hardened shell, testing how much pressure the creature could tolerate. Every movement was deliberate. Measured. He paused whenever the hatchling tensed, giving it time to adjust. It was slow work. Painfully slow. But he did not rush. Because rushing would hurt it. And that he refused to do. Piece by piece, he began to remove the outer layers. And beneath them, something changed. The truth beneath. The scales underneath were different. Smoother, brighter, alive, not dull, not broken, just hidden. The barber's eyes narrowed slightly, a faint smile forming. "Well now," he whispered, "that's more like it." He continued, carefully, patiently. Hours passed, then days. The hatchling began to change. Its breathing steadied. Its movements grew slightly stronger. Its eyes brighter. For the first time, it began to lift its head without trembling. To shift its weight without collapsing. To exist without pain. And still the barber worked. The wings were the most delicate. They had been bound the worst, layers of hardened material restricting every movement. He approached them last. Not out of hesitation, but out of respect. "This is going to take time," he murmured. And it did. He worked slowly, freeing the joints, loosening the layers, massaging the stiff muscles beneath. The hatchling reacted more strongly here, small movements, faint sounds. But it did not pull away. Because it was learning something new. Relief. The moment. And then, at last, the final layer came free. It fell away, hitting the floor with a soft, hollow sound. For a moment, nothing happened. The hatchling remained still. Quiet. Then, it moved. Slowly, carefully, it stretched its wings. Not halfway, not weakly, fully, for the first time. And the universe changed. Light. It began as a glow. Soft, subtle, then it grew. Light burst from the creature's body, radiant, brilliant, impossible. Its scales shimmered, reflecting colors that did not belong to any known spectrum. Light bent around it, warping space itself. The small, dull creature was gone. In its place stood something magnificent. Something powerful. Something extraordinary. The hatchling lifted its head. And it cried out. Not weak. Not broken. But strong. The sound echoed through the station, deep and resonant, carrying a force that made the very walls tremble. Outside, ships paused. Inside, lights flickered. The station felt it. The barber stepped back, shielding his eyes slightly. For a moment, even he was speechless. Then he smiled. Softly, proudly. "Well," he whispered. "There you are." The Empire shocked. In an empire where nothing escaped notice, where every movement of fleets was tracked and every fluctuation of energy catalogued, there were few things that could truly be called unexpected. This was one of them. A rumor begins. It started as a whisper. A fragment of a report buried beneath routine transmissions and trade records. An anomaly. A disturbance in deep space. At first it was dismissed. There were always anomalies. Strange gravitational ripples. Unidentified energy surges. Minor disruptions caused by unstable stars or rogue technologies. Nothing worth attention. But then the reports continued. And they began to change. Ships traveling along outer trade routes reported something unusual. Not hostile, not aggressive, but impossible. A creature. A dragon. It moved through space not as other dragons did, not as a weapon or a beast bound by instinct, but as something far more fluid. It did not tear through space. It shaped it. Where it passed, the darkness did not remain empty. Light followed. Not ordinary light, no. This was something else. Colors that did not belong to any known spectrum rippled in its wake, bending and folding like living things. Space itself seemed to respond to its presence, stretching, twisting, and reforming, as if acknowledging something greater than its own laws. It's not just flying, one pilot reported, his voice trembling. It's changing everything around it. At first, command dismissed it as exaggeration. Then more reports came. Different ships, different sectors, different witnesses, all describing the same thing. A radiant dragon, a creature of impossible beauty. In powers, the growing disturbance. The whispers became conversations. The conversations became concern. Energy readings began to spike across multiple systems. Sensors struggled to interpret what they were detecting. Instruments failed to categorize the phenomenon. It was not a weapon, not a known life form, not a natural event. It was something new, something beyond classification. The Empire had faced countless threats before, rebellions, invasions, cosmic disasters. But this was not a threat. It was a question, and no one had the answer. The Emperor's dismissal. When the first reports reached the inner systems, they were filtered, analyzed, and presented to the highest levels of authority. Eventually, they reached the Emperor. He listened in silence as the data was presented. Visual recordings, energy readings, testimonies from commanders and pilots, all pointing to the same conclusion. An unknown dragon had emerged, and it was unlike anything ever recorded. The chamber remained still as the final report ended. The Emperor's expression did not change. An anomaly, he said finally, his voice calm and cold. Nothing more. But Your Majesty, one of the advisors began carefully, the energy signatures suggest. I have seen the data, the Emperor interrupted. His gaze hardened slightly. If this creature possesses power, it will be measured. If it presents a threat, it will be eliminated. He turned away, already dismissing the matter. The Empire has faced greater uncertainties. The advisors fell silent. Because when the Emperor decided something, it was decided. And yet, the reports did not stop. Approach. Days passed. Then cycles. The dragon did not disappear. It moved closer from the outer sectors to the mid-systems, and then, inevitably, toward the core. Every system it passed through reported the same phenomenon. Light, color, distortion, not destruction, not chaos, something else, something transformative. Ships did not flee from it. They watched, they followed. Some even tried to approach, but none could keep pace. Because it did not move like anything they understood. It did not obey distance or time. It simply appeared, and vanished, and appeared again, closer each time, until finally, it reached the heart of the Empire. The sky breaks. The capital system had never known fear. Protected by fleets beyond counting, shielded by technologies refined over millennia, it stood as the ultimate symbol of control. Nothing entered without permission. Nothing approached unnoticed. And yet, it came, without warnings, without resistance, without explanation. The sky changed. At first it was subtle. A ripple, a distortion in the starlight. Then it grew. Light fractured across the void, splitting into impossible patterns. Colors spread like cracks across reality itself, bending the darkness into something fluid and alive. The fleets reacted instantly. Weapons charged. Shields activated. Formations shifted. But no command was given, because no one understood what they were seeing. And then, it emerged. The dragon revealed. It descended from the fractured sky like a living constellation. Its wings stretched across the horizon, vast and luminous, each movement sending waves of light cascading through space. Its scales shimmered, reflecting colors that no instrument could measure, no mind could fully comprehend. It was not merely large. It was immense. Its presence alone reshaped the sky, bending light around its form, warping distance, altering perception. Where it moved, space followed. And when it roared, the sound was not just heard. It was felt. It resonated through ships, through stations, through the very structure of the capital itself. It was a sound that carried power, not of destruction, but of existence. Of truth. The fleets faltered. Not from damage, but from awe. The palace trembles. Within the obsidian hall, the emperor stood. The same hall where judgment had been passed. The same hall where a small, trembling creature had once been deemed unworthy. Now, that hall felt smaller. The light from outside spilled through the vast openings, illuminating the darkness that had once consumed everything. The court gathered quickly. Generals, nobles, scholars, all drawn by the same overwhelming presence. They looked upward, and they saw it. The dragons, and in that moment, they understood. Or rather, they realized how little they understood. One by one, they fell to their knees. Not in command, not in obedience, but in instinct. Because something within them recognized what stood before them. Something beyond rank, beyond logic, beyond fear. Reverence. The emperor's doubt. The emperor did not kneel. He stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, his gaze fixed on the creature descending from the sky. Impossible, he murmured. But even as he spoke the word, he knew, because something about the dragon was familiar. Not its form, not its size, but its presence. A faint echo of something he had seen before. Something he had dismissed. Something he had rejected. The dragon descended. Closer, closer, until at last, it landed. The return. The ground trembled beneath its weight. Not violently, but with purpose. The dragon folded its wings, the vast expanse of light drawing inward, concentrating into a form that still dwarfed everything around it. It lowered its head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Its eyes met the emperor's, and in them, there was no fear, no uncertainty, no weaknesses, only understanding. The emperor stood still. For the first time in countless cycles, he did not know what to say. The human, and then, from behind the dragons, a figure stepped forward. Small, insignificant. Humans. The contrast was almost absurd. A being so ordinary standing beside something so extraordinary. And yet, he did not seem out of place. He walked calmly, without hesitation, without fear. As if he belonged there. As if he had always belonged there. The court watched in stunned silence. Because no one understood how this could be. How something so small could stand beside something so vast. And not be consumed by it. The question. The emperor's gaze shifted. From the dragon to the humans. What have you done? He demanded. His voice was strong. But beneath it, there was something new. Uncertainty. The human met his gaze. Unshaken, unimpressed, he shrugged lightly. Nothing extraordinary, he said. His voice was calm. Simple. I just saw what you didn't. The words hung in the air. Heavy, unavoidable. The truth. The emperor's eyes narrowed. And what is that? He asked. His voice tightened. Because part of him already knew. But he needed to hear it. The human tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. Then he answered. That it wasn't useless. A pause. It just needed someone to understand it. Silence. Complete. absolute. No one spoke. No one moved. Because in that moment, the truth settled over the hall, and it could not be ignored. The realization. The Emperor stood motionless. The words echoed in his mind. Not useless, just misunderstood. He looked at the dragons, truly looked, and he saw it, not as it was now, but as it had been. Small, weak, trembling, struggling to stand. And he remembered. The judgment, the dismissal, the command. Remove it. He had not been wronged. Not according to his empire. Not according to its rules. Strength was everything. Weakness had no place. And yet, here stood the proof that his judgment had failed. Not because the creature had changed, but because he had misunderstood it. He had seen limitation, where there had been potential. He had seen weakness, where there had been growth. He had seen failure, where there had been possibility. And someone else, someone insignificant, had seen the truth. A different powers. The Emperor had conquered galaxies. He had commanded armies. He had shaped the fate of civilizations. But this was something he had never mastered. Understanding, not control, not dominance, but understanding. The ability to see beyond what is, and recognize what could be. And in that moment, he realized something far more unsettling than any enemy. His power was incomplete. The shift. The court remained silent, waiting, because everything now depended on the Emperor. On what he would say, on what he would do. The old Emperor would have rejected this, dismissed it, reasserted control. But the moment had changed, and so had something within him. Slowly, he lowered his head, not fully, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of the truth, of the failure, of the lesson, the story that spread. The event did not remain contained. It could not. Too many had seen it. Too many had felt it. Too many had witnessed the impossible. The story spread across fleets, across systems, across the entire empire. But it was not the story of power, not of conquest, not of dominance. It was something different, something new. The story of a dragon once called useless. That became extraordinary. The story of an emperor who learned the limits of his own judgment. And the story of a human, a simple barber, who saw what no one else did. The legacy. In time, the empire changed. Not completely, not all at once, but slowly, subtly, a shift began. Judgment became less absolute. Observation became more patient. And somewhere deep within the systems of power, a new idea took root. That strength was not always visible. That value was not always immediate. That sometimes, the greatest power was not in control, but in understanding. The dragon, and as for the dragon, it was never called useless again. It soared freely through the empire, no longer bound by expectation or judgment. A living reminder, a symbol, not of power alone, but of potential realized. The barber and the humans. He returned to his small shop, to his quiet corner of the universe, to his simple work, listening, observing, understanding, as he always had. Because for him, nothing had changed. He had not created greatness. He had only revealed it. The emperor and the emperors, he never forgot. Because for the first time in his reign, he had been wronged. And in that realization, he had grown. The truth. And so the story endured. Not as a legend of dominance, but as a reminder that sometimes What is called useless is simply unseen